Hey, what's up guys? It's Josh and today I want to go over a special video on expression maps, what it is, how to get it set up, and what differentiates my video from, let's say, another tutorial on expression maps. Stay tuned and let's go. So first thing is we're going to be talking about what it is. So if you're not too familiar with expression maps, it's a feature that's available in Cubase and also Logic now. So Cubase was a pioneer of this, and basically what it is a script that you can program your key switches into so that you can actually change them on a dime. There are two ways to do this. So the first way is through this drop-down menu, and that's only available if you do the attribute mode. And then the other way is through this little lane. If you go to the articulations lane here, you can select them accordingly this way as well. So if I wanted to make all those notes that I just highlighted to legato, you can see that it just switched over. So that is the way in which it works. Let's press play and just show you how that would work. So these are trills. And then this, as you can see, is a whole tone trill and a half tone trill. And then it'll be followed by legatos and then more legatos. Cool. And then you hear it in context with everything else. Okay, great. So as you'll see, this is scattered throughout the rest of my session with all the other instruments, and all my instruments are used in key switch based samples. So if you don't know what key switches are, basically they're the samples I'll show you right over on this screen, and every library nowadays will have a master key switch patch where you can change your articulations accordingly. On this window, if I click on here, you can actually see which notes are being assigned to which key. So the range of a flute, let's say, is up here. So there's available keys that are down here that are specially programmed just to switch the different articulations. So with the expression maps, going back to this page here, you can see how everything is programmed accordingly to the other side where you saw the VST window. So let's go ahead and show you how that would work in terms of changing that. So let's say I wanted to program this differently. If I wanted, say, staccato or staccatissimo on that one, and then let's do marcato. Let's change this to trill. Let's change this one to a flutter tongue, and let's just put it all together. Oh, sorry, let me solo that. So staccatissimo, flutter, legato. All right. Cool. So that's how easy it is to switch from one articulation to another, note by note. Now, the method I'm using is called attribute. It's an attribute type, and that is showing here on this window. So if I go here, I'm on my flute. A stands for the attribute version 1 opus. That's just a little label I gave it. But if you go over on this right hand side and click on the type column, you can change these to either attribute or direction. So I opted for attribute because the attribute mode gives you an added option of being able to select your notes from this drop down menu and do the articulations that way. I did have someone ask me in my last live stream how to get this going, so I thought I'd make a video for all of you guys to learn and get it set up. So let's talk about the third step. Third step will be how to get this all programmed in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's just go and get out of everything and make a new project. So create an empty project here. And then we're going to start from a blank canvas. So over on this end, I'm just going to add a new instrument track. Let's just load an instance of Contact. And let's jump right onto Jaeger's violin. Okay, this is a 16 violins patch. You'll see here there are 8 key switches down at the top and bottom here, legato all the way to Bartok pizzicato. So as you'll see also, there's a note that's mapped out to each one, C-1 all the way to G-1, and those are listed here on the red key. So if I click on this and play, you can see how that would work, right? Now, you could technically play this all on one keyboard if you wanted. So if you had a big 88 sized keyboard, you can do that. I have a 61 keyboard. It does the job for me. And I thought it would be good to address how sometimes the traditional way of how key switches were designed and developed to be able to play on a keyboard is a little bit outdated, I would say, nowadays, because now we can do that with fancy touchboard controllers, touchscreen controllers like what I have up on my studio here. And also the key switching is really nice to be able to switch note for note as we did over here on this side. So what I'm going to do, before I forget, I'm going to copy this over onto this side so that we have something to play with. So that's my little violin that I just copied over. All right, and we might as well just name it right now. So let's just call this violins 16. All right, let's open the VST patch back up here, put that on the side, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to get started with the expression map. And I'll put this kind of more on the left side. Okay, put it side by side so you can see where the notes are mapped, and then you can program them in separately. So the first step is to click on Add Map. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this over here on this side. It's kind of tucked away. I'm going to copy that and just paste it. So it's the same name for the instrument track. All right, and then over on the middle hand side, this is where most of the mapping and most of the articulations are done. All right, so let's start here, and what I'm going to do is click on the name for slot 1, and I'm just going to start on the top and copy the articulations note for note, tremolo, spiccato, staccato, portato, col legno. Bartok pits. Okay, so we have our blank articulations. Well, the next step is to map this all out. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on the legato again, go to the right hand side where it says output mapping, and we're going to dial down where that note is triggered. So over here on the right side you see C-1. So we're just going to go here, C-1, copy that also note for note. So C#-1 for sustained. Tremolo is D-1. Spiccato is, you guessed it, D#-1. We're halfway there. E-, oh, that's 0. E-1. Portato is F-1. F#-1. and last is G-1. Okay, so we have our notes that are triggered output to these names, these labels. All right, the next step is now, if you see on the bottom right hand side is our articulations. This is where we have to be a little more methodical on our approach. So we're going to click on articulation 1 lane, and you can either do symbols and opt for doing all symbols, or you can just make your own wording, a custom word. I like to do that just because it's a little bit more consistent throughout, and that's up to you really. But if whatever you choose, what I recommend is stick with that system for all your sample libraries. So for me, I just like to make it easy for myself, and I'll just write in legato, or abbreviate actually leg for legato, and that way it's easy to read. Same thing with sustain. Some people will call it long. I like to differentiate long from legato because they kind of look the same. They both have L and the letter G in there. So sus is a little bit better for me to just for my eyes to recognize. Tremolo would be trem. Again, you don't have to abbreviate these if you don't want to. I highly recommend doing that. That way you have like a nice system for yourself. Whoops, I just did the wrong one. So just make sure we are on spic. Okay. So spic for spiccato, stack for staccato. Okay. Next one would be por, P-O-R for portato. Colegno, or coleg for colegno. And the last would be Bartok. So you can do something like Bartok pits. That's the same. Anyways, that's the system I use. So everything is ordered the exact same way. Okay. Sometimes you might see this where some of these words are different from here. I don't recommend doing that. I try to line them up articulation by articulation. And that way, when you start to set the remote keys, which is the next step, they're orderly. So that's the next step. So we're going to go down to this button here, set remote keys. You can actually do it automatically with that button, but you can also just do it manually here as well. So you can either just go in one by one, type it in, or I can click on this, and if it's starting at C-2, which is the very first note of any MIDI keyboard controller, you just press OK, and it'll automatically list those out for you. Now, a playable note is generally starting at C0. So for instance, if it's, let's say, a bass, string bass, not guitar, but just a string bass from an orchestra, so they have a C extension. Sometimes you can go all the way down to C. Contra bassoon or contra bass bassoon, I think it's contra bassoon, is goes down to also a C or even an A. But at that point, that's where having C0 be kind of the cutoff as a playable note versus these notes down here, C-2 and up to about B-1 is about 24 triggers. So it's a safe bet to program about 24 articulations per instrument. At most, it's a good rule of thumb. You can go over, of course, if it's like a higher instrument. Let's say it's a flute or a violin. You can go all the way up to where that first starting note would be, if it allows for it. If your VST instrument actually has that many articulations, but in most cases you can get by with 24. So I would say a good rule of thumb is go start from C-2 as your remote, And then C-2 actually converts this over to now C-1, C#-2 converts over to C#-1, and so on. So that's the idea. The remote is basically, it hijacks the note, so to speak. So and the reason why we do it this way is because sometimes you can actually get a separate keyboard, a MIDI controller, and have that mapped from C-2 all the way to B-1. You can do that as an option. You can get a keyboard, like a touchscreen keyboard, and you can program it that way. You can use a app like Composer Tools Pro by MIDI Kinetics, which is the one I use, and this app is really powerful if you can program it, and you can also map articulations from C-2 and upwards on one screen. So that's the benefit. That's the added benefit of doing it this way. The other last step I should mention is well, actually say I should talk about two things. There's the type. So like before, I talked about attribute type, which is the one I opt for. There's also the directional type, and directional is it's nice. I can kind of show you how that would work. So if I were to have a note played, and let's do articulations. I think I need to change all of these out. So going here, if I were to be able to demonstrate this for you real quick. Oh, I have to select this, of course. So that's I guess that's another logical move, is to go and select the Jaeger, because we just made the map, but we haven't actually assigned it into this track. So now it's assigned, and then that's off to the side of this under the expression map window. So it's assigned. Okay, and I just want to show you the difference between the direction and the attribute. So I can do legatos for these three notes. I can do tremolo for those three notes, and staccato. Let's try again. Okay, so let's press play. Okay, so that works pretty well. Direction mode is great, and I used that for a while, but I noticed that you can't actually highlight notes and then go up here and click on that button for it to drop down. The only way for that to work, again, is if it is in attribute mode. So let's do that real quick so I can show you how that would work. Okay, so the attribute mode is all selected, and how this would work is I would actually highlight all the notes that I want changed. Then we have, actually let's do tremolo again. Why don't we do Bartok pits and follow that up with some staccatos, coleños and staccatos here. Let's press play. Right, so you can see how that would that works in logical fashion. So we just got everything all mapped out accordingly, and it's working great. But the difference between the attribute mode and the direction, again, is you have this added benefit of a drop-down menu. All right. Now let's talk about the strengths between the two. Direction was designed to help save you time. As before, as you can see, all I had to do is click on it 1, 2, 3, just to get those three different articulations going. Whereas here, you kind of have to highlight, go up here, and select them. However, attribute mode is a little bit more, well, it's actually a lot more rock solid than the direction type. So meaning when you're kind of rewinding and pressing play, going back and forth between sessions, the direction mode can kind of get wonky and start to glitch, whereas the attribute mode in my experiences work a lot more steady or stable And so that's why I think the attribute mode is important and to address, because it has been overlooked, and I think a lot of my colleagues on YouTube who make tutorials opt for the direction mode, which is fine, but I think there's not a whole lot of love for the attribute type. And because some of my audience members were also asking me how I could get this going, I thought I'd make a video on that. So I hope that helps. With that being said, before we go, I'd like to also address when you make this, this will all stay native. So all these patches that you make here will stay native into your session that you save in Cubase, and it won't transfer over to another session. So in order for you to be able to do a transfer, you have to actually save this patch. So you press save, you put it into a folder that you want, and as you can see, I already have made a lot of these in the past, and then you would just save it and then load it into a different session that way. So that wraps up my tutorial for the expression maps using the attribute type. I hope that helps you guys. And as far as if you have any questions, anything to add, feel free to add it in the comments below. I'll part with you one more tip for the day, which is if you want to save yourself time and not make expression maps, there's a great company out there called Babylon Waves. They make a product called Art Conductor, art for articulation, so Art Conductor. And there's going to be a link in the description below on where you can find that company and see their product to see if you're open to just buying their product line, and then they're going to be able to make all of these expression maps for you. The only thing I'll say with them is they have their own system or own abbreviation system. So if you want to be able to use a different one, you do have to still tweak them. So that's kind of the downside. However, I have used Art Conductor in the past, and it saved me a lot of time. So that's my last little tidbit for you today before we go. Alright, so if you found this video helpful, smash that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and then also share this channel with other of your friends who want to learn more about music production, music composition, and technology. My name is Joshua Sohn, and I will see you next time.